There was a morning, I must have been 7 or 8 years old, when I came downstairs before the sun and found my grandmother standing at the kitchen table with a clay jug in one hand and a wooden spoon in the other. She was stirring something into a tall glass of water. The kitchen was cold. I remember that. The wood stove had not been fed yet, and I could see the fog of her breath in the lantern light. She did not look up when I came in. She just kept stirring, slow circles, patient, like she was mixing something that needed time more than it needed force. I stood there watching her, bare feet on the pine floor, and I asked her what she was doing. She took a sip. Then she looked at me over the rim of the glass and said, "This is the first thing that goes into my body every morning. Has been since before your father was born. Will be until the Lord calls me home." I did not understand what she meant. Not then. I was a boy. I wanted breakfast. I wanted warm bread. I did not care about what an old woman stirred into her water at 5 in the morning in a cold kitchen. But I never forgot that image. Her hand on the spoon, the lantern throwing long shadows across the wall, the sound of the water moving in the glass, so quiet you could hear the wind outside pressing against the window, and the smell, faint, sharp, a little sour, like the smell of the orchard after the first frost, when the last apples have fallen and started to soften against the ground. What she was stirring into that water was apple cider vinegar, raw, unfiltered, made from our own trees, pressed in our own barn, fermented in our own cellar through the slow months of autumn and winter. And she had been drinking it every morning of her adult life. Now I want you to understand something before I go any further. I am not a doctor. I have never been to a doctor more than 3 times in my life. I'm not here to give you medical advice or to tell you that one thing will fix everything that ails you. The world is full of people selling miracles in bottles, and I have no interest in joining them. But I am here to tell you what I have seen, what I have watched with my own eyes across 7 decades of living in a community that does not change its ways with every passing fashion. And what I have seen is this: the people who followed this practice, who put this into their water first thing every morning, lived longer, worked harder, got sick less, and kept their minds sharper than the ones who did not. That is not a theory. That is 70 years of watching. My grandmother lived to be 93. She worked her garden until she was 88. She could remember the name of every child, grandchild, and great-grandchild, and she had more than 60 of us by the end. She buried 2 husbands, survived a fire that took the first house she ever lived in, and never once, not one single time that I can recall, complained about her health. And every morning of her life, before she did anything else, she drank a glass of water with raw apple cider vinegar stirred into it. Let me tell you how we make it. Because what you buy in a store and what comes out of an Amish cellar are not the same thing. And if you do not understand that difference, you will not understand why this works the way it does. In late autumn, after the harvest, we press our apples, not the good ones, not the firm, pretty ones we set aside for eating and for pies, the ugly ones, the bruised ones, the small, knotted, misshapen ones that fell early and sat in the grass. My father used to say the best vinegar comes from the apples the world does not want. He said that about a lot of things, actually. He believed that what the world throws away is often what holds the most life inside it. We press those apples in a hand-crank press, the same kind my grandfather used, the same kind his father used before him. The juice runs out dark and cloudy, full of pulp and skin and seed. We pour it into wide-mouthed crocks, stoneware, not metal, never metal, and we cover those crocks with cheesecloth tied tight with string. Then we set them in the cellar where the temperature stays cool and steady, and we wait. That is the part the modern world cannot stand, the waiting. For weeks, the juice ferments. Wild yeast in the air does the work. We do not add anything. No powders, no starters, no chemicals. just air and time and the natural order of things doing what they have always done. The sugar turns to alcohol first. That is the hard cider stage. Then the alcohol, if you leave it alone and let it breathe, turns to acid, acetic acid. That is the vinegar. By late winter, sometimes early spring, you have something in those crocks that is alive. I mean that. It is alive. There is a layer that forms on top, thick and cloudy, like a skin. We call it the mother. My grandmother called it the mother. Her grandmother called it the mother. It is a colony of living things, good bacteria, the kind your body recognizes and knows what to do with, because your body was built to work alongside them. When you go to a store and buy vinegar that is clear and bright and perfectly filtered, you are buying something that has had the life taken out of it. They have pasteurized it, heated it, killed the mother. What you are left with is sour water. It may taste similar. It is not the same thing. Do you know what happens when you take something alive and make it convenient? You lose the very thing that made it worth having. Now let me tell you what this does inside your body, as I understand it from a lifetime of watching, not from reading. I cannot give you the science the way a man in a white coat would, but I can tell you what I have observed, and I trust observation more than I trust most theories. The first thing, and my grandmother told me this plainly when I was old enough to listen, is that it settles the stomach. Not the way a pill settles it, not by numbing or blocking or shutting something down. It settles it the way good soil settles after rain. It creates an environment where things can work the way they are supposed to work. When your stomach has the right balance, the right level of acid, your food breaks down properly. You get what you need from what you eat. Nothing sits and rots inside you. I have watched men in my community eat meals that would stagger a younger man. Thick stews, heavy bread, pork and potatoes and cream, and get up from the table and go back to work in the field without a moment of discomfort. And I have watched men outside our community eat half as much and spend the rest of the day holding their bellies, reaching for tablets, complaining of burning and bloating and heaviness. The difference, as far as I can tell, starts with what they do before they eat, not after. The second thing is what it does to the blood. I'm careful with this because I do not want to say more than I know, but I have watched it. When my father was in his 50s, his hands began to swell in the mornings. His knuckles would go thick and stiff, and he had trouble gripping the plough handles for the first hour of work. My grandmother, his mother, told him he had been lazy about his morning water. She said it the way she said everything, without softness, without apology. She told him to go back to the vinegar water every morning without fail, and she told him to add a little raw honey to it, just enough to taste. He did. Within 3 weeks, the swelling in his hands went down. Within 2 months, it was gone. He never missed a morning after that, not once in the remaining 30 years of his life. I am not telling you it was a cure. I am telling you what happened. Here is something else I want you to think about. In our community, we do not have many of the ailments I hear about in the outside world, the things people talk about in the towns near us, the tiredness, the heaviness in the body, the trouble with joints and digestion and sleep. These things are not common among us. We are not immune to illness. We get sick. We age. We die like everyone else. But the slow decay, the creeping breakdown of the body in middle age that seems to be normal out there, that is not normal among us. And I have spent a long time thinking about why. Part of it is the work. We move our bodies every day from youth to old age, and that matters more than most people realize. Part of it is the food. We grow what we eat. We know what is in it, because we put it there. But part of it, and I believe this firmly, is these small practices, these daily rituals, handed down from grandmother to mother to daughter, from grandfather to father to son, that keep the body in balance before it ever gets the chance to fall out of balance. The vinegar water is one of those practices, maybe the oldest one we have. My grandmother used to say something that stayed with me all my life. She said, "The body is like a lantern. You do not wait until the flame goes out to tend to it. You keep the glass clean. You keep the wick trimmed. You add oil before it runs dry." She was not a poetic woman. She was practical to her bones. But she understood something that I think the modern world has largely forgotten, that caring for the body is not something you do after it breaks. It is something you do every morning before it has the chance to. Now I promised I would tell you something, and I have been holding it. My grandmother was not the only one in our family who kept this practice. My grandfather did too, but he added something to his that she did not. And what he added, and why he added it, is something that was told to me only after he passed, by my father, sitting on the edge of the porch on a summer evening when the heat had finally broken and the crickets had started up in the tall grass by the fence line. My grandfather added a pinch of ground ginger root to his morning water, along with the vinegar. Not much, just enough that you could feel the warmth of it on your tongue. My father told me that his father had learned this from a neighbor, an older man, a widower who had come from the old community in Lancaster County before settling in our district. This man had been a bone setter, not a doctor, but a man people went to when something was wrong with the body. He had hands like shovels, and a gentleness about him that did not match his size. And he had told my grandfather that the ginger root kept the blood moving the way a creek keeps moving when you clear the stones from its bed, that it kept the passages open, the flow steady, the warmth reaching every part of the body, even in the dead of winter. My grandfather followed that advice for the rest of his life. He worked outdoors in weather that would break most men, ice storms, blizzards, mornings so cold the water in the trough would freeze solid before the cows could drink. And he never once, not once, had the trouble with his hands and feet that so many men his age complained of. The cold did not reach his core. His fingers stayed nimble. His feet stayed sure. He was splitting wood at 81 years old, and his swing was as clean and steady as a man half his age. What I am telling you is not magic. It is not a secret potion. It is something so plain and so ordinary that most people would walk right past it. A glass of water, a spoonful of raw apple cider vinegar, a pinch of ginger if you have it, taken first thing in the morning on an empty stomach before you eat, before you work, before you do anything else. That is all. But do you know what makes it powerful? It is not the ingredients. It is the faithfulness. It is the doing of it every single day, without fail, without excuse, without waiting until something goes wrong to start. That is what my grandmother understood. That is what my grandfather understood. And that is what I am asking you to understand. Let me tell you what I have seen happen when people abandon the old ways, because I have seen it, and it troubles me. There was a family in our district 2 generations back that decided the old practices were superstition. The father was a smart man, a well-read man by our standards. He had more books in his house than anyone I knew, and he had a way of talking about things that made you feel small if you disagreed. He told his children that the vinegar water was an old wives' tale, that it did nothing, that they were wasting their time and their vinegar. He stopped the practice in his household. His wife went along with it because she trusted his judgment. His children grew up without it. Within 10 years, that family had more sickness in their house than any other family in our district. The father himself developed trouble with his stomach so severe that he could barely eat solid food by the time he was 60. His wife's joints swelled and stiffened until she could not kneel in church without help. 2 of his children, still young, had problems with their digestion that no remedy seemed to touch. I am not saying the vinegar water would have prevented all of that. I am not foolish enough to claim that one practice can hold back every ailment that life sends your way. But I watched that family, and I watched the families around them who kept the old ways and the difference was plain. It was visible. You could see it in how they moved, how they worked, how they aged. The smart man's pride cost his family something that no amount of reading could give back. I want to speak plainly to you now, whoever you are, wherever you are sitting as you listen to this. I do not know your life. I do not know what your body has been through, or what you have tried, or what you have been told by people who know more about medicine than I ever will. But I know this. The simplest things are almost always the most important things, and the things that cost nothing are almost always the things that are worth the most. A glass of water with raw apple cider vinegar in it costs almost nothing. It takes 30 seconds to prepare. It requires no special knowledge, no equipment, no prescription, no permission from anyone. It is the kind of thing that is so humble, so unremarkable, that the modern world cannot believe it could matter, and so it gets ignored, overlooked, laughed at, replaced with something more expensive, more complicated, more impressive sounding. But the tree does not care whether you are impressed by it. It only cares whether you eat the fruit. My grandmother drank her last glass of vinegar water on the morning of the day she died. She was 93 years old. She got up before the sun, the way she always did. She went to the kitchen. She stirred her vinegar into her water with the same wooden spoon she had used for 50 years, the handle worn smooth and dark from the oil of her hand. She drank it standing at the window, looking out at the garden she had tended since she was a young bride. Then she sat down in her chair by the stove, closed her eyes, and did not open them again. My mother found her there an hour later, the glass rinsed and set upside down on the cloth beside the basin, the way she always left it. Everything in order, everything tended to, the lantern clean, the wick trimmed, the oil poured in one final time. She did not die because she was neglected. She did not die because something broke that could have been fixed. She died because her time had come, and her body, having been cared for faithfully every morning for more than 70 years, let her go gently, quietly, without the long suffering that I have watched so many endure in the world outside our fences. That is what faithfulness looks like. Not dramatic, not miraculous, just steady, just daily, just one glass of water, stirred slowly in a cold kitchen before dawn, for as many mornings as the Lord gives you. I think about her hands sometimes, the way they held that spoon, the way they moved in those slow circles, patient and unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. And in a way she did. She had all the time she needed, because she never wasted a single morning. There is a proverb we have, passed down so long that no one remembers who first said it. It goes like this: the well that is drawn from every day never goes dry, but the well that sits untouched turns bitter. Your body is that well, and what you put into it first thing in the morning, before anything else, before the noise and the rush and the demands of the day, that is what determines whether the water stays sweet. I have said what I came to say. The rest is yours to do with as you will.